Hi, everybody. My name is Notario. I will be your faculty tutor for this section of N4Q03, Advanced Nursing Concepts 2. This video will just be an introduction to the course. So I'll be talking about some of the major course elements. The request is that you review this video as well as the course outline and course manual in its entirety prior to coming in on Wednesday. And the intent on that is just so that we can focus on the group consultation work in a little bit more detail on that day, so that we don't have to spend so much time on the course structure and whatnot. Okay. So I'm just going to bring up my screen here just because it will help with kind of working through the material. Of course, thank you to Alita Bowman, who has structured most of these slides with some adaptations from myself, as well as has worked with the consulting group on designing this course. All right, so before we proceed, of course, we'd like to start off with our land acknowledgement. McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Okay, so as I mentioned, this introductory video will just go over some of the major course elements as well as the course structure. The intent is that I'm going to explain this now so that when we meet together in class, then we can focus a little bit more on developing your groups and sorting out your group assignments. I'm sure you all know by now that this course will be facilitated via Zoom, as many of your previous online courses have been. The meeting details are going to be embedded in the discussion board. What is unique to this Zoom meeting series is that I do request, or well, frankly, I do require you to log in using your McMaster Zoom accounts. If you need further instructions on how to log in using your McMaster Zoom accounts, I've included some instructions below, as well as you can contact me. So in terms of course context, my email is on the screen, as well as our level 4 lead, Alita Bowman. For the Conestoga site, your level 4 coordinator, Suzanne Bush, her email is there. If you are at the other sites, McMaster or Mohawk, your course contacts will be Alita and Priscilla, respectively. And of course, your site-specific academic advisors, should you wish to book an appointment with them, their emails are on the screen, and can also, all of this information can also be found on your course manual. All right, so just briefly, a little bit about me. I am a Mac grad through and through. I did my undergraduate and graduate training at McMaster University. Clinically, I am an emergency nurse by trade. I started off my career as a new graduate in the emergency department at a community center in the GTA. And currently I am in the role of advanced practice nurse in the emergency and trauma department at a academic center in Toronto. Part of my role there is to work with various educational and quality improvement initiatives, both focused on emergency nursing, as well as the wider hospital strategic directions. Of course, I'm faculty here, teaching in the undergraduate program, primarily in the senior year levels. So N4Q, as well as the N4K and J clinical courses. And I'm also on faculty at Humber College in the continuing education stream, teaching in the emergency and cardiology nursing programs, as well as the physical assessment. I do teach some other courses here and there, so if you're taking any emergency or acute care type courses, we may cross paths again. Outside of the emergency department, I do have some clinical experience in other areas, predominantly in peri-anesthesia and flight nursing, as well as dipped a little bit into pharmaceutical research. My primary interests right now are in trauma and emergency nursing from a clinical standpoint, as well as quality improvement and education. Okay, so overview of level 4. So, in N4Q, you are in your second term of level 4. So that we have a number of courses. This course, N4Q, is usually taken concurrently with your N4K10 course. And that has some significant implications for the course structure, as I'm sure you're well aware by, potentially conversing with some of your peers in senior years and whatnot. So this is a 3-unit course. We're going to be looking at a variety of themes, and all of them kind of align with the overall or the overarching course direction of the level 4 program. The classes are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. For this section, we're going to be doing Wednesdays for this site. Our class will be running from 9 o'clock in the morning to 3:30. There you have kind of a typical breakdown of our class. Our typical agenda will be 2 hours and 15 minutes in the morning for our morning facilitation, which includes a 15-minute break, about 45-ish minutes of our group and tutor consultation time to work on our group projects. And then in the afternoon, after we take lunch, we'll resume with the afternoon facilitation session. Now, you will notice that for this course, it's a 6-week course, and in fact, we start on the second week of the term. So although the term has already started, we have actually delayed this course start to be on the second week of the term. And the reason for that is to accommodate many people's clinical placements have organization or facility-specific orientation during that first week. So while we recognize that, of course, that's important to attend, we also want to make sure that you have enough time to attend both things, so you're not stuck in a spot where you have to choose one versus another. So for that reason, we start on the second week. The course runs only for 6 weeks, so hence the all-day format. And again, this is done in conjunction with your N4K10 schedule, where you're running about 24 hours a week for the first half of your N4K10 schedule. And then in the afternoon, or sorry, in the second half of the term, you move to closer to full-time hours, where this course would be typically finished. Okay, so that's done to try to make sure that you have enough time to pay attention to your coursework, as well as give you time to focus in the latter half of the term on your clinical work. Okay. So as an online course, this is just a standard reminder about our course behavior, as well as your student code of conduct. Regardless of the course format, there is a student code of conduct both at the university as well as your respective college. With the onset of online classes, this is very important. And we as a school, we're committed to an inclusive and respectful community, and these principles and expectations extend to online activities, including our class, including the electronic chat groups, any video calls, or any other learning platforms. If you're concerned about any of these, the Equity and Inclusion Office is available to advise and assist the students, and you can reach them at the email displayed on the screen. Okay, so by now, with N4K, you're probably all beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you know you're probably all really excited to come to the end of your undergraduate studies and looking, you know, you've definitely heard this term, looking upward and outward towards your future careers. So with level 4, everything that we do in the 4th year or level is focused on these 3 pillars or 3 themes. So complexity, integration, and transition. So complexity, looking at the you know, exploring concepts and topics and recognizing how complicated it can be, and how it can be very multifactorial. We're looking at integrating all of the knowledge that you've acquired in your previous learning, as well as the theme of transition, where we're looking at transitioning to the workforce and your entry to practice as a clinician. This course will have some major assignment and evaluation measures. So despite the way it's displayed on the screen here, I'll first talk about your facilitation, because for the most part, that's where most of you will be working first. So your facilitation will be a group grade, and we're going to form our groups in the first class. It's going to be about a 15% of your final grade. More on that coming up later. Your classroom engagement in those facilitation sessions constitutes another 15%. The classroom engagement rubrics in previous courses were typically filled out twice, midterm and final. For this course, because we are working on a truncated time frame, we're going to only work on one classroom engagement rubric at the end of the course. Okay, so I'll discuss that more when we meet in person on Wednesday. Okay. The remaining 2 projects is a capstone project, which is also a group assignment. This is a project that's going to be, you're going to be working essentially throughout the duration of the 6 weeks, and then at the end or the last class, you'll be presenting to each other as a group presentation. And this is the objective here is an introduction to applying QI principles. And your scholarly paper, which I will speak to at the end, is worth the remaining 45%. And this is where you're looking at your individual entry to practice. Okay, so the learning sequence, as you all know, it's posted on the course content folder of this website. Week 2 will be primarily led by myself. We'll be looking at a brief overview of the course and forming up the groups, and then we'll spend the rest of our time trying to work in our individual groups and coming up with topics and activities. Okay, weeks 3 to 6 will be our facilitations. Again, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. There is a midterm recess in between, as you see there. And then on the week 7, which is our last class, you'll have some oral presentations for your capstone projects. Okay, after that, we're done for the in-class portion. But on week 9, you do have a scholarly paper due at the beginning of our normal class start. So for example, us, if we start at 9 o'clock, it would be due on that Wednesday at 9 o'clock on week 9. Okay, so more on that later. Of course, ensure that you view the learning sequence document as well as the course outline and manual and read it in its entirety. I'll leave that to you to complete. So for the group facilitations, the facilitations for this term will be a little bit different. In previous courses, you had a facilitation topic, and you had a little bit of a mini facilitation or a mini session in the first week, where you introduced the topic to the class, you allowed them to identify some learning objectives, and you go away for a week, research on your own, and then you come back, and then you talk about the topic in more fulsome detail. For this assignment, it will be a bit of a modified PBL approach, and this is well described in your course manual, in that your team will be given 1 2-hour session. Okay, so you will have 1 2-hour session, and you do have the option, and in fact you are expected to post your objectives and your pre-readings prior to the class, so that the class comes prepared and having completed the pre-readings, and then you're going to have 1 2-hour session to talk about your topic. Okay. We do have a number of mandatory topics, which I'll talk about next. And we have 2 elective topics, which I'll leave up to you to decide, and we can decide that when we meet together. The aims of the assignment are to engage the tutorial group, as always, in facilitating an analysis and discussion of a topic that spans across the continuum of health and social services. So what does that mean? We're going to be looking at some topics that are relatively complex. So we may not necessarily be focused on one particular person, but we will be looking at a topic as a whole and how it affects or has the potential to affect the overall healthcare system. All right. As always, we do expect you to apply some sort of conceptual framework, model, or theory as a means of exploring that topic or that problem, and help guide you through that topic. Okay. And of course, we'll be looking at looking forward to your creativity in terms of your active teaching and learning principles within this session. So looking forward to making sure that you're engaging the group and they're interacting appropriately and whatnot. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm facilitating the first class, and we're going to form up our groups by the end of the first class, as well as deciding on when each group will be facilitating. Okay, the mandatory topics are described in your manual. So the first being disaster preparedness and response, including pandemics. You could probably imagine that's a relatively a relevant topic given the current events. Now, it doesn't have to be on pandemic response. It can also be on disaster preparedness, which is a very specific and different aspect of things. So it can be anything that falls within that realm. So you can look at man-made disasters, natural disasters, or you can look at pandemics. And the role of the nurse and the healthcare system in responding to those types of situations. The second is medication and treatment errors. Now, I think there's a little bit of a misnomer here. While we are looking at medication and treatment errors, we're not looking just at the error. We are looking at the overall broader picture. Okay, looking at why errors occur, what the healthcare system does to kind of mitigate some of that and try to prevent errors from reoccurring, and looking at the process of when an error does occur, what does the system and members of the system do to try to investigate that, and how do they engage in a very specific practice of continuous quality improvement, or CQI. So I do want to highlight that we're not looking at medication and treatment errors in isolation, because medication administration is very much something that you have covered in the past, and you are all very familiar with like all the rights of medication administration and all that, but we're looking at this from a system perspective and looking at what does the system do? How do we ensure that we try to prevent these errors from happening? And if an error does happen, like what happens and what's the process? Okay. The third topic is medical assistance in dying, recognizing that you did previously approach or explore a topic on palliation and palliative care. So we're going to be specifically looking at the topic of MAID and the current legislation and impact of recent changes to that legislation in Canada. Well, while you did learn about palliation and palliative care previously, we will be looking specifically at MAID as a topic. The fourth topic is on abuse and interpersonal violence. This topic can range from intimate partner violence, child abuse, elder abuse, as well as other forms of abuse and violence towards other people. So more on that in your course manuals. The last two mandatory topics, one will be sexual health, the sexual health and cultural safety and inclusivity. So the focus here will be to explore the nurse's role in providing culturally safe and inclusive care and understanding and addressing the specific care needs of the LGBTQI2S+ community, and looking at some of the implications or considerations that we need to think about when looking after this community. The sixth topic is an extension of your Indigenous health education. This is a topic that is going to be looking at the Indigenous health and inequities and culturally safe practice in Canada through the lens of from Indigenous practices. With this module or with this topic, there are associated mandatory learning modules, and there are details on how to access that in your course manual. So it is recommended that this topic be reserved for either the last or second last week of the facilitation sessions, just to allow for everyone to complete these modules. And proof of completion is mandatory. You do have to submit it onto the assignment Dropbox, demonstrating that you've completed such. Okay. So as mentioned, the mandatory e-learning is described on your course manual. So please make sure that you complete that as soon as possible before, and definitely before the course end. Okay. So there, in addition to those 6 mandatory topics, there will be some two elective topics, which we can decide on when we meet as a group and to decide on what those topics can be. There's a variety of options that we can explore, and we can talk about some of the previous topics that people have looked at in the past back then. But just start thinking if there's a topic that interests you and kind of looks at system level issues, then I'd be looking forward to exploring that. Okay, so the facilitation process for the teams, we're going to, with each group, you're going to have a group group contract. You will have to all collectively review and agree to that group contract. And when you're pre-planning, we can collaborate together to make sure that your plan is appropriate and meets the course objectives. And we can also talk about, some major points that, we want to make sure that you cover and whatnot. You are required to post your learning goals and objectives in the template, in the facilitation template. So previously you were asked to submit a pre-plan. For this course, you're only expected to submit the facilitation learning goals template. However, I will say that having a pre-plan is strongly encouraged to make sure that everybody's on the same shared mental model of how we're going to facilitate that class. So while you're not going to be submitting that pre-plan, I do suggest that you continue on with that practice and make sure you plan your session accordingly. You are required to post 2 to 3 reading references, as well as any supplemental reading articles or whatnot, at least 1 week prior to your planned date. Okay. All right, so the session itself, so come the session, you're going to have 2 hours to facilitate your topic from beginning to end. I say in the agenda 2 hours and 15 minutes to account for a 15-minute break in between. And one session will occur in the morning, one session will occur in the afternoon. Okay. The facilitation assessment criteria, there's a lot of words here. I will just defer you to the actual source document on the Avenue site. You can see it under the course content and the evaluation criteria. That will be used to help grade the assignment, in addition to using the guidelines for grading oral assignments, which you're already familiar with. Okay, so the capstone project. So this is another group assignment that will be done in parallel to your current clinical placements. So we're going to form 8 facilitation groups, and we're also going to form 8 capstone groups. But this time we'll be focusing on your looking at a clinical issue or a clinical practice problem that you can address or explore in your settings. Okay, so there are 3 components to this. There's planning and implementing and evaluating a QI activity, which for the most that encompasses the majority of this actual project. Then there's the abstract, and then there's the oral presentations at the end of the week 7. Okay, one thing to note, and it's been highlighted throughout, that this is not a research project. This is a introduction to QI project. If it was a research project, there are some certain requirements, including obtaining research ethics board's approval, which we will not be exploring, simply because we don't have the time to actually kind of explore these things. A full research project, in fact, a full QI project often takes multiple years, whereas you have 6 weeks. So this is just a very, very small activity, and it's an introduction to some of the QI principles that you've previously learned, and you're looking to apply them. Okay, so when I talk about quality improvement, just recall that you previously did take a course on 4NR3 and had an introduction to quality improvement. So this is an opportunity for you to tap on some of your previous learning and apply it. Okay, so in terms of the learning aims, so what are we actually doing here? So you're going to be looking at your clinical settings, and we're going to try to identify a practice issue, and not necessarily something that the unit-wide is having a problem with, but something that you can look at within your own practice, right? So previous examples including prevention of ulcers or prevention of falls, or making sure that you're, adhering to your safety checks or hand washing practices and whatnot. So we can discuss some of the common activities that people have explored in the past, as well as look at potential new activities. So you're going to look at that, identify in your practice setting, is there anything that's kind of standing out that is important to your patient population? Then you're going to look to the literature and look to see what's been done previously to help try to improve this, and you're going to go into your whole QI process to identify how you can go about exploring how to improve. Okay. From there, you're going to do a small little activity, quality improvement activity, and you'll be evaluating that as you go. And then at the end, you're going to summarize your findings via an oral presentation. Okay. So throughout this project, you will be expected to apply a quality improvement model, framework, or theory. So that's why it's important to tap on some of your previous learning from for NR3. Okay. So in terms of the steps of this, this is again well described in your manual. So please do make sure that you read that manual in its entirety. Okay, but so first off, you're going to start off with your planning, and the planning will essentially start off immediately. And this is why I'm doing this introductory video, because I want to give you some more time in class to actually work with your groups to try to figure out what you would like to explore. Okay, so you're going to have a planning session. I'll be consulting on that to make sure that you're on the right track. And we're going to make sure that you are actually applying a QI framework, model, or theory, and you making sure that that is guiding your thought processes and your activity. Okay. Of course, with anything, you're going to look to the evidence and look to the literature to see what's been done in the past and see if any of that can be applied to your current clinical context. And then you're going to look at carrying out that clinical activity in your clinical context. Of course, performing some sort of evaluation, self-evaluation that's very small, of your activity to look at to see if it was viable or feasible or successful. Okay, and then finally, you'll submit a abstract and you'll submit a oral presentation, which I'll get to next. The abstract, you do have to provide a draft around week 4, so that make sure that you're on track, on the right track. And your final abstract will be submitted 1 week prior to your oral presentation. Okay. And on the last class, we're going to have our oral presentations. We're all going to present to each other our description of our projects and our brief findings, as well as potential or future directions. The oral presentation will be approximately 25 minutes, followed by a 10-minute Q&A period. Okay, so we're looking at about 35 minutes in total, and we're going to go through 8 presentations. Okay. Okay, so the scholarly paper, to be honest, I'm going to defer talking about this in detail for now, just because I know that I just talked about a lot of things, and it's going to be difficult to absorb a lot of this. So I'm going to actually talk about this paper in detail a little bit closer to midway through the course, and certainly, definitely before we have our last class. Okay, but briefly, you will be submitting a paper by week 9. Okay, and essentially you're going to be writing a paper examining your own professional practice. You're going to be looking at your evaluations, peer, self, and tutor evaluations up to this point, and look at where you want to be in your first year of practice. So, for example, me, I was an emergency nurse. I want to be an emergency nurse. This is where I want to work. I'm going to identify a learning need based on my summative evaluations, as well as where I want to go in terms of career projection. And then I'm essentially going to design a learning plan for my first year of practice. So it's not the same as your N4K learning plan. I'm going to look at my first year of practice, and I'm going to align that with my identified reflection and identified strengths and areas for growth. I'm going to look at my entry to practice competencies, as well as considering the desired setting of your first year of practice. Okay. You will also be required, and this is new for this academic series, you'll be also be required to link your goal to the CNO Code of Conduct, which is a relatively new document. And in development of your learning plan, you'll be expected to look at 3 specific, realistic, evidence-based learning activities to address this goal. Okay, so this is all in line with your learning plan and making sure that you have specific activities to address the goal. And again, I can't emphasize this enough, but it has to be evidence-based. It has to be, the rationale for those activities has to be rooted in some sort of rationale. Okay. One thing to highlight is that the paper is not to focus on interprofessional care, because this is something that you previously looked at. So your identified learning need cannot be focusing on interprofessional care. Okay, so again, more on that later on. I know that there's a lot of information to absorb, so we'll talk about that closer to the midway through half the course. Okay. In terms of classroom engagement, again, because it's a truncated course, we're not going to do a midterm and final. We're just going to do one classroom engagement and peer evaluation rubric, and that will be done or due on week 7. Okay, the expectation is that you're all going to participate actively throughout the course. Okay. Academic integrity, as always, as you know, all of your assignments are submitted through the Turnitin service, and we do review things. It is incredibly important that you maintain that academic integrity. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is, and making sure that, you know, even unintentional cases will be brought up for review. So make sure if you have any questions or if you're not sure how to go about citing things, please take a look at that website on the screen there, as well as if you have any questions, please ask. Okay. Okay, so that's the course. All right, that's the course, and I'm sure you'll have questions when we meet. But that's the overview of the major course elements. So I do want to ensure that you're set up for success, and that's why I want to spend as much time working on your projects and on your 2 group projects during our class time. In preparing for your sessions and your planning of your facilitation sessions, I did post some pre-readings here, and I will post the full references in below. Okay, I do ask that you review these 3 key articles and just come prepared to discuss what are the key points of those articles, and I will test you. Okay, so I'm not just posting the readings just to post readings, but I will test you, and I will test comprehension and make sure that you've done it. Okay, so please become prepared for that. You will be expected to speak to those main points and discuss it and make sure that, I mean, the idea is going to be apply it to your facilitation sessions. Okay. All right. Part B of your pre-class prep is going to be introduction, or technically a review of quality improvement. From here, I want you to find out some articles or resources that will answer these questions. Okay. Now, you don't have to answer all of the questions, but I want you to pick 2 of these questions and find an answer to them. Okay, and I do want you to post your answers and your resources in the discussion post below. Okay. Please have this done before we meet on the Wednesday. It will be important for you to come prepared, having read the sources and be able to explain it, because we will be discussing it in detail. So my 4 questions that I pose to you is, what is quality improvement in healthcare? What are some models, theories, or frameworks in quality improvement? Okay. Number 3, What are some tools to examine processes and outputs and root cause analysis? Number 4, how do we measure success or change? Okay, so I am posing all those 4 questions. It's, you know, the first 2 are relatively simple to explain, and you know, I hope that you're able to tap on some of that previous learning for that. The last 2 questions, I really encourage you to start thinking about that, because frankly, all of these questions will be applicable to your capstone projects. So this will just start the juices running, or get the juices running, or start you thinking about your QI principles. Okay. All right, so that's about it for me. The part C is just, I would like you to introduce yourself on this, on the appropriate discussion board here. This will help me form up your groups, as well as get to know who you are. So if you could please post in that discussion thread your name, who you are, what your stream/site is, if you have any prior education, either nursing related or otherwise. Importantly, I would like to know your current clinical placement, okay, as well as any clinical interests or career aspirations, or you know, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be when you grow up? Okay. So anyway, that's all for me. I'm looking forward to meeting you all on Wednesday. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me a message. Okay. Thank you very much. That is all. I will see you in class. Bye for now.